The sun hung low over Abeokuta that afternoon, casting golden light across the marketplace where 200 souls had gathered beneath the ancient Iroko tree. It was the week of the harvest festival, and the air should have been thick with celebration. Drums pounding rhythms that made children dance, women balancing baskets of yams and dried fish, men laughing over palm wine and old stories. But the drums had fallen silent. The laughter had died. Every eye in that marketplace was fixed on one girl standing in the center of the crowd, trembling like a leaf in a storm she never saw coming. Her name was Amina, 19 years old, thin from too many missed meals, wearing a faded wrapper that had been patched so many times it was more thread than cloth. Her eyes were wide with terror, but beneath that terror was something else, something her stepmother Folake had never managed to break, despite 3 years of trying. Dignity. Even now, even here, with shame closing in like walls, Amina stood straight. Her hands clutched that worn wrapper against her chest, knuckles white, breath coming in short gasps, and towering over her, face twisted with theatrical rage, stood Folake, the woman who had married Amina's father, and then, some whispered, poisoned him for his land. Folake's voice cut through the marketplace like a machete through sugarcane, sharp and merciless, designed to draw blood. "You are a thief!" she screamed, pointing one finger at Amina like she was identifying a demon. "A snake I fed from my own pot. A rat I sheltered in my home." The accusations rolled off her tongue with practiced ease, each word calculated to wound, to humiliate, to destroy. Amina tried to speak, her voice trembling but determined. "I did not take anything, Mama. I swear on my father's grave I never touched." But Folake's hand shot out fast as lightning, grabbing a fistful of Amina's wrapper, yanking downward with brutal force. Amina stumbled forward, catching the cloth just before it fell completely, exposing her to the entire village. Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. The village elders sat on wooden benches beneath the Iroko tree, their faces carved from stone, eyes heavy with something between pity and cowardice. Tradition bound them like invisible chains. Family matters must be settled within families first. Interference meant disrespect, meant chaos, meant the unraveling of the social fabric that held their world together. So they sat, and they watched, and they did nothing. But there was one man in that crowd who was not bound by their traditions, not anymore. He stood at the edge of the gathering, leaning against a black SUV that gleamed like obsidian against the red dust of the village roads, so clean it seemed to belong to another world entirely. His clothes were simple, dark trousers, a white shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, but anyone with eyes could see the quality in the fabric, the way it draped, the subtle expense of simplicity done right. His name was Chike Okonkwo, and he had been watching this scene unfold for 7 minutes, though it felt like 7 hours. His jaw was clenched so tight it ached. His hands, hanging at his sides, had curled into fists without his permission. Something in his chest had cracked the moment he saw Amina's face. Not just the fear in her eyes, but the stubborn, desperate dignity. She was drowning, and everyone was watching her drown, and nobody was reaching out a hand. He had returned to Abeokuta 1 week ago to visit his mother's grave, to walk the roads of his childhood, to remember where he came from before Lagos, and money and success had transformed him into something his younger self might not recognize. Cheek had not planned to interfere in village politics. He had not planned to do anything except pay his respects and leave. But then, he had seen Folak. He had watched her for days, moving through the marketplace with that predatory smile, her daughter Ngozi trailing behind like a smaller, meaner shadow. He had seen how people tensed when Folaki approached, how conversations died, how even the boldest women suddenly found reasons to look away. And he had seen Amina, invisible Amina, the girl who fetched water before dawn, who ground cassava for pennies, who helped the village midwife deliver babies and prepare medicines, who moved through the world like a ghost trying not to be noticed. He had asked questions, quietly, carefully, buying palm wine for old men who remembered everything and paying market women who knew everyone's secrets. What he learned had turned his stomach. Adekunle the blacksmith, dead 3 years under suspicious circumstances, his widow Folake, who had appeared from nowhere and married him with indecent speed, the inheritance stolen, the daughter reduced to servitude, the village too afraid or too apathetic to intervene, and now this, a public shaming, a stripping, a final humiliation designed to drive Amina from the village forever. Cheek's investigation had uncovered truths that would shatter this community, but he had planned to handle it quietly, legally, through proper channels. But watching Folake grab that wrapper, watching Amina's face crumple with shame while 200 people stood by like spectators at some twisted entertainment, something in Cheek snapped. Plans and caution and proper channels could go to hell. He pushed off from the SUV and started walking. The crowd parted without thinking, sensing something in his stride. Authority, maybe, or barely controlled fury. Folak had grabbed Amina's wrapper again, was pulling, and Amina was fighting to hold it, tears streaming down her face now, her voice breaking. "Please, Mama, please don't." Folak's smile was vicious. "The village must see what you are. A thief, a disgrace. When I am finished with you, no household will take you in, no man will touch you. You will be—" "Stop!" The word cracked across the marketplace like thunder before rain. Every head turned. Folak's hand froze on the wrapper. Amina looked up, tears blurring her vision, and saw him, the stranger with the expensive car, walking toward her with his eyes locked on Folak like a predator who had just identified prey. Folak's face twisted with confusion, then annoyance, then something close to fear. "Who are you to interfere?" she demanded, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. Cheek smiled, but there was no warmth in it, no humor, only the cold promise of reckoning. "My name is Chike Okonkwo," he said, his voice carrying easily across the silent marketplace, calm but weighted with authority that made even the elders sit straighter on their benches. "I was born in this village 39 years ago. My father was Obi the yam farmer. My mother was Adais the midwife's apprentice. Some of you remember them. Some of you remember me, the skinny boy who left 15 years ago with nothing but dreams and desperation." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The old ones remembered the funeral when both parents died in a farming accident, remembered the relatives who circled like vultures, remembered the boy who disappeared rather than watch his inheritance get stolen. "I went to Lagos," Chiki continued. "I worked. I built a business, logistics, transport, warehouses. I became what people call wealthy, though I prefer the word fortunate. And I came back to Abeokuta 1 week ago to visit my mother's grave, to remember where I came from, to see if this village was still the place I loved." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "And what I have seen this week has disgusted me." The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. Falake's face flushed dark with rage. "You have no right to interfere in family matters. This girl is mine to discipline. She stole from my daughter, from the chief's family, and by our traditions." "Traditions," Chaik interrupted softly, "are meant to protect the community, not enable cruelty. And I have every right to interfere. because I am about to make this village an offer that will change everything." He turned to face the elders, ignoring Folek now like she was beneath his notice, which enraged her more than any insult could have. "The land that Adekunle the blacksmith left when he died. The land you awarded to Folek, the land that has been in dispute. I want to purchase it." Chief Ogunlade, Ngozi's future father-in-law, sat forward on his bench, interest flickering in his calculating eyes. "Purchase it?" "Yes. I plan to build a processing facility here. Agricultural goods, value addition, export preparation. It will employ 50 people initially, more as it grows. It will bring money into Abeokuta, opportunity, connection to larger markets." The crowd stirred with excitement. Jobs, money, progress. These were words that made tired villages dream. "I will pay 50 times the land's current value," Chiki said calmly. The marketplace erupted in gasps and excited chatter. 50 times. A fortune. Life-changing money for whoever owned that land. Chief Ogunlade stood, smoothing his ceremonial robes, eyes gleaming with the kind of interest powerful men show when they smell profit. "That is a generous offer, Mr. Okonkwo. Very generous indeed." Cheek nodded. "But I have one condition. One absolute, non-negotiable condition." The chief's smile faltered slightly. "Which is, I will only purchase from the legal owner. Not a fraud, not a thief, not a murderer. The rightful heir, backed by law and evidence and truth." The marketplace went silent. Folek's face drained of color. "Murderer," she whispered. "How dare you?" "I dare," Cheek said, turning to face her now with eyes like iron, "because I have spent the last week investigating you, Mama Folak. I have investigated your past, your previous marriages, your convenient widowhoods, your pattern of appearing in struggling villages, marrying vulnerable men, and watching them die under mysterious circumstances. I have evidence, documentation, witnesses, and I have already contacted the police in Ibadan, who are very interested in reopening several cases that were closed too quickly." The crowd began to murmur, a low rumble of shock and dawning horror. Folake stumbled backward, shaking her head. "Lies. All lies. You have no proof of—" "We will get to that," Chika said quietly. "But first, let us settle the matter of ownership." Babatunde? The eldest of the village elders stood slowly, his joints creaking, his face heavy with shame that had been building for 3 years. "Yes, Mr. Okonkwo? You were given a letter by Adekunle before he died. A sealed letter with instructions about his property. Do you remember?" Babatunde's eyes widened. Yes. Yes, I remember. He gave it to me 6 months before his death. Told me to keep it safe. To deliver it to Amina when she turned 18. And did you deliver it?" "I tried. But when I went to retrieve it from my home, it was gone. There had been a break-in 2 months before, but I thought nothing was stolen. The letter must have been taken then." Chika reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper, yellowed with age, sealed with red wax. "This letter?" Babatunde's hands trembled as Chika handed it to him. The old man examined the seal, the handwriting, the paper itself. Tears filled his eyes. "This is Adekunle's hand. His seal. I would know it anywhere." He broke the seal carefully, reverently, and read aloud in a shaking voice. "To my beloved daughter Amina, if you are reading this, I am gone. Do not mourn too long. I am with your mother now, and we are at peace. I leave you my land, my savings, my tools, everything I have built. Folek knows this is your inheritance. I have told her clearly." The old man's voice broke. I have married Folek because I am lonely, and she seemed kind, but I do not fully trust her. Forgive me, daughter, for bringing a viper into our home, but I have made provisions. This letter, the legal documents filed with the village recorder, my will registered in Ibadan, all protect you. Do not let anyone take what is yours. You are strong like your mother. You are worthy like your father. Stand tall, my moon. Stand tall always. Baba Tunde looked up, tears streaming down his weathered face. I failed you, Amina. I failed your father. I should have kept this letter safer. I should have fought harder when it disappeared. Forgive me. Amina was crying now, openly, her hands over her mouth, her body shaking. Those were her father's words, his voice reaching across 3 years of silence and suffering. How did you get this? Chief Ogunlade demanded, staring at Chike with new wariness. Your houseboy, Baba Tunde, a young man named Taiwo. He was paid by Folake to break into your home and steal the letter. She replaced it with a forgery, one that left everything to her. But Taiwo kept the original, hidden, in case he ever needed leverage against Folake. When I offered him more money and guaranteed his safety, he gave it to me. Folake's face had gone from pale to gray to the color of ashes. That proves nothing. So there was a letter. So what? Adekunle changed his mind before he died. He told me so. My brother was there. Tunji heard him say, Tunji, Chike interrupted, pulling another paper from his jacket. Your brother, Tunji, the witness you brought before this council to testify that Adekunle verbally gave everything to you. He unfolded the paper. This is a police record from Ibadan Central Prison. Tunji Adeyemi, arrested 3 years ago for theft and fraud, sentenced to 2 years. He was incarcerated when Adekunle died. He was released 2 months after the death, which means he could not possibly have been present to hear any final words. He handed the paper to Chief Ogunlade. The chief read, his face darkening with each line. Is this true, Folake? Folake's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. My brother was confused about the dates. He thought, he lied. Chiki said flatly, you paid him to lie. Just like you paid Taiwo to steal. Just like you have paid, manipulated, and threatened your way through this village for 3 years, stealing from a girl who had already lost everything. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were angry now, a low growl building like distant thunder. Someone shouted from the back of the crowd, What about the earrings? She still stole the wedding earrings. Folake seized on this like a drowning woman grabbing a rope. Yes, the earrings. Whatever lies you tell about the past, she is still a thief. The gold earrings meant for my daughter's wedding were found in her hut, found beneath her sleeping mat. Everyone saw them. Cheek turned to look at Amina. She was staring at the ground, tears dripping onto the red earth, her body shaking with silent sobs. Amina, Cheeky said gently, look at me. She raised her eyes slowly, and the pain in them was almost unbearable to witness. Did you take the earrings? No, she whispered. I swear on my father's soul, I never touched them. I do not know how they came to be in my hut. I was sleeping. I did not hear anyone enter. I did not. You do not need to explain, Chiki said quietly. I already know what happened. He turned to face Ngozi, Folake's daughter, who had been standing beside her mother, silent until now. The girl was 20 years old, pretty in a hard-edged way, dressed in an expensive wrapper and gold jewelry that seemed obscene given the circumstances. Ngozi, Chike said, how long have you and your mother been planning this? Ngozi's eyes went wide. I do not know what you mean. You have a friend, Aduni, the carpenter's daughter. You visit her every market day, drink palm wine together, gossip about boys and weddings and rivals. You tell her everything. Cheeky pulled a small recording device from his pocket. I paid Aduni to talk to me. She was reluctant at first, felt guilty betraying your friendship. But when I explained what you were doing to Amina, when I told her this was about preventing a terrible injustice, she agreed to tell the truth. He pressed play. Aduni's voice crackled out, slightly distorted, but clear enough. Ngozi told me everything last week. She was laughing about it. She said her mother would plant the earrings in Amina's hut the night before the wedding. Then in the morning, they would discover them missing and search everywhere. When they found them in Amina's hut, it would prove she was a thief. Chief Ogunlade would demand justice. The village would turn on her completely. Amina would be so shamed she would have to leave Abeokuta forever, and then there would be no one to challenge Mama Folake's claim to the land and the inheritance. It was brilliant, Ngozi said. Cruel, but brilliant. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating, the kind of silence that precedes violence. Then the marketplace exploded, people shouting, women crying out in anger, men calling for Folake's blood. Chief Ogunlade stood, his face purple with rage. You involved my family in this scheme. You made us accomplices to your fraud. You humiliated us with false accusations. Ngozi grabbed her mother's arm, terrified. Mama, I did not think. Be quiet, Folake screamed, but her voice had lost all authority. She sounded desperate now, cornered. Chief Ogunlade turned to his family members seated among the elders. The wedding is canceled. Immediately. We want nothing to do with these people. Nothing. Ngozi's face crumpled. Her wedding, her future, her escape from poverty, all gone in seconds. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Folake tried to push through the crowd, perhaps thinking she could run, could escape before this got worse. But the villagers had formed a wall. There was nowhere to go. Cheek was not finished. And now we come to the matter of how Adekunle died. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade, and once again, silence fell. Mama Yetunde, he called. Would you step forward, please? The village midwife emerged from the crowd slowly, reluctantly, her old body bent with shame and secret-keeping. She was 70 years old, had delivered half the babies in Abeokuta, had tended the sick and dying for 50 years. Everyone respected her. Everyone trusted her, and she had been carrying a terrible burden for 3 years. Mama Yetunde, Chiki said gently, tell them what you told me 3 days ago. Tell them about the day before Adekunle died. The old woman's face was wet with tears. He called me to the forge, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He was sick, vomiting, sweating even though it was not hot. Dizzy, he said, like the world was spinning. I examined him, asked what he ate. He said Folake had made him a special tea that morning. For his strength, she told him. Mama Yetunde's voice broke. I recognized the symptoms. I have seen them before in my years of medicine. Slow poison, the kind that mimics sickness, that builds in the body over weeks, that eventually looks like heart failure. I told Adekunle to go to the hospital in Ibadan. He refused. He was stubborn, proud. He said it was probably just bad food, that he would rest and be fine. The midwife looked at Amina with anguished eyes. He died the next day, and I said nothing. God forgive me, I said nothing. Because Folake came to me the night after the funeral. She threatened me, said if I spoke about poison, she would tell the village I had been stealing medicines, selling them for profit, that I was a witch who caused children to die. She said no one would believe an old woman over a grieving widow. She said she would destroy me. Mama Yetunde fell to her knees. I was afraid. I am ashamed, but I was afraid. And so I watched you suffer, Amina. Watched you lose everything. Watched you become a slave in your own home. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Amina moved then, crossing the distance between them, kneeling beside the old woman and wrapping her arms around her. You did what you had to do to survive, she whispered. I understand. I forgive you. The midwife sobbed into Amina's shoulder while the village watched, many of them crying now, confronted with their own cowardice, their own complicity in this injustice. Chike let the moment breathe, let the guilt and shame settle over everyone like ash. Then he continued, relentless. Folake was married before Adekunle. Twice, actually. Cheek pulled out a folder, thick with documents. Her first husband was a cloth merchant in Oshogbo named Bode Ajayi. They married in December 9 years ago. He was a widower, lonely, with property and savings. She was charming, attentive, perfect. He died 6 months after the wedding. The death was ruled natural causes. Heart failure. Folake inherited everything. His family contested the will, suspicious of the speed and convenience of his death. But before it could go to court, Folake disappeared, sold everything, and vanished. He turned a page. Her second husband was a farmer in Elisha named Gbenga Oluwole, land-rich, cash-poor, recently widowed with 3 young children. Folake married him, promised to care for the children. 8 months later, Gbenga died. Same symptoms: vomiting, dizziness, weakness, sudden collapse, heart failure, the local herbalist declared. Folake inherited. The children were sent to relatives. Folake sold the land. And again she disappeared before questions could become accusations. Chike looked directly at Folake, who stood frozen, her face a mask of horror. You have a pattern, Mama Folake. You find vulnerable widowers, men with property and no strong family to protect them. You charm them, marry them quickly, and then you kill them slowly. Poison that mimics natural death. Chief Ogunlade stood, his voice shaking. These are monstrous accusations. Do you have proof? Chike reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth bag. This was found in Folake's compound yesterday, hidden in a clay pot beneath her bed. My investigator retrieved it while she was at the market. He opened the bag and poured the contents into his palm. Dried leaves and twisted roots, dark and brittle. Mama Yetunde, would you identify these plants? The midwife approached, looked, and her face went gray as old clay. Oruo root, she whispered, and Ewa edge leaf, and a gogo igen bark. She looked at the crowd. Mixed in this combination, ground fine and steeped in hot liquid, they create a poison, tasteless, odorless. It causes symptoms that look like heart sickness, vomiting, weakness, dizziness, chest pain. Over weeks, it weakens the heart until it simply stops. The victim appears to die of natural causes. I have seen it used before, long ago, before we learned better. It is forbidden medicine. Evil medicine. She pointed at Folake with a trembling finger. This is what killed Adekunle. This is what she used. The marketplace erupted again, but this time the anger was different, darker, more dangerous. People pressed forward. Folake backed away, her eyes wild. You cannot prove I used that, Folake screamed. Someone else could have planted it. You may be trying to frame me. Chike shook his head. My investigator wore gloves. The bag has fingerprints. We will test them. But even without that, the pattern is clear. 3 dead husbands, 3 inheritances, 3 disappearances, and in your current compound, hidden poison. The police are already investigating. They are reopening the previous cases. They are speaking to the families you destroyed." Folake looked around wildly, seeking escape, finding none. The villagers had surrounded her completely. Her daughter Ngozi was sobbing on the ground, her wedding dreams shattered, her future gone. And Amina stood in the center of it all, no longer the victim, no longer the powerless orphan. She stood straight and tall, her father's letter clutched in her hand, vindicated at last. Folake's face twisted with rage and desperation. "This is all her fault," she shrieked, pointing at Amina. "That ungrateful girl. I gave her a home. I fed her. And this is how she repays me? By bringing this stranger to destroy me?" She lunged forward, her hand reaching for something hidden in her wrapper. Flashed in the sunlight, a knife, small but deadly sharp, the kind used for gutting fish. Everything happened in seconds. Folake charged at Amina with the knife raised, her face contorted with murderous fury, all pretense of civilization gone. Amina froze, unable to move, unable to process that this woman actually meant to kill her in front of everyone. But Chiki moved faster than thought, faster than fear. He threw himself between them, his left arm coming up instinctively to block the blow. The knife slashed across his forearm, cutting deep. Blood sprayed across the red earth, bright and shocking. Folake stumbled back, staring at the bloody knife in her hand, shocked by her own violence. Then men from the crowd rushed forward, grabbing her arms, wrestling her to the ground. She fought like a cornered animal, screaming curses, but they held her fast. Chiki looked at his arm, blood running down to drip from his fingers. The wound was deep, would need stitches, would leave a scar. Then he looked at Amina, who stood with both hands over her mouth, eyes wide with horror. "Are you hurt?" he asked calmly, as if his arm was not bleeding profusely. She shook her head, unable to speak. In the distance, the sound of engines, vehicles approaching fast. The police, who Cheek had called 2 hours before the tribunal began, knowing it would come to this. 2 police trucks rolled into the marketplace, and officers emerged with handcuffs and stern faces. They had heard everything. Chika had arranged that too, a recording device hidden in his jacket, capturing every word of evidence, every confession. Folak was dragged to her feet, still screaming, still fighting. "You will all regret this. I curse this village. I curse that girl. I curse—" An officer clapped handcuffs on her wrists, cutting off her tirade. "Folak Adeyemi, you are under arrest for suspicion of murder, fraud, theft, and attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you use it." They loaded her into the back of a truck. She twisted to look back at Amina one last time, her face full of venom and hatred. But Amina did not look away. She stared back, unflinching, and in that moment, Folake saw something that made her blood run cold. The girl was not broken. After everything, the abuse, the humiliation, the stolen inheritance, the public shaming, Amina was not broken. She was steel forged in fire, and she had survived. The trucks drove away, carrying Folake toward a justice that was 3 husbands and too many years overdue. The marketplace remained silent for a long moment, processing what they had witnessed. Then, slowly, people began to approach Amina. They came one by one, then in groups. Women who had watched her suffer, men who had looked away, young people who had mocked her, elders who had failed her. They came with heads bowed, with tears, with shame heavy on their shoulders. "Forgive us," they murmured. "We should have helped you. We were afraid. We did not know it was so bad. We are sorry." Amina stood there, still clutching her father's letter, and accepted their apologies with quiet grace. She did not rage at them, did not throw their cowardice back in their faces, though she had every right. She simply nodded, acknowledged their words, and in doing so, showed them a mercy they had not shown her. Chief Ogunlady approached last, his ceremonial robes somehow diminished now, his authority tarnished by association with Folek's crimes. "I owe you an apology," he said formally, "and restitution. My family was nearly drawn into this evil plot. We will support you however we can." Amina looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "I do not want your money, Chief. I want something else. Name it. Help me build a place where girls like me can learn and work and be safe, where orphans are protected, not preyed upon. That is the restitution I want." The chief nodded slowly, respect dawning in his eyes. "It will be done." Then Amina turned to Chike, who stood a few feet away, his arm wrapped in cloth torn from someone's wrapper, blood seeping through. "You are hurt," she said quietly. "It is not so bad. You stepped in front of a knife for me. Yes, you could have died. So could you." They stared at each other, and something passed between them that made the watching villagers smile despite the trauma of the day. Recognition, maybe, or the beginning of something that neither of them had names for yet. Mama Yetunde bustled forward with her medicine bag. "Let me see that arm before you bleed to death, foolish man." Chike smiled and sat on a bench, extending his wounded arm. The midwife cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency, her gnarled fingers surprisingly gentle. "This needs proper stitches. 17, I think. Maybe more. You will have a scar." "Good," Cheek said. "A reminder. Of what? Of what matters? Not money, not comfort, but standing between cruelty and its victim, always." Amina sat beside him, watching the midwife work, and for the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that did not include fear. The days that followed were strange and dreamlike. Amina moved out of the storage hut and back into her father's house. Her house now, legally and officially. Chief Ogunlade arranged for the village recorder to produce all the original documents proving Adekunle's ownership and Amina's inheritance. The savings that Folaki had stolen were partially recovered from a bank account in Ibadan. It was not everything, but it was enough. Enough to start over. Enough to build something. Cheek stayed in the village while his arm healed, taking a room at the compound of a family who remembered his parents. Every day, Mama Yetunde came to clean and dress his wound, and every day, Amina came with her. At first, they did not speak much. The weight of what had happened hung between them, too heavy for small talk. But gradually, as the stitches held and the wound began to close, they found words. Chiki told her about Lagos, about building his business from nothing, about the loneliness of success. Amina told him about her father, about the forge and the songs, about the girl she used to be before grief and cruelty had reshaped her. They talked about justice and mercy, about forgiveness and revenge, about the difference between surviving and living. 3 weeks after the marketplace confrontation, Chiki's stitches were removed. The scar was thick and pink, running from his wrist to his elbow, a permanent mark of the day he chose conscience over caution. "It looks like a warrior's mark," Amina said, tracing it lightly with one finger. Cheek shivered at her touch. "I am no warrior." "You are wrong. Warriors are not just people who fight. They are people who stand between harm and the helpless. You are exactly that." He caught her hand gently. "I have to return to Lagos soon. My business cannot run itself forever. But I will come back. I meant what I said about the processing facility. It will be built. jobs will come, and he hesitated, suddenly uncertain in a way that made him seem younger. And I would like permission to write to you, to visit when I can, to know you better, if you are willing. Amina was quiet for a long moment. 3 years of abuse had taught her to be careful, to protect herself, to trust no one. But this man had bled for her, had risked everything for a stranger, had given her back her father's words and her own future. Yes, she said finally, you may write, you may visit. But Cheek, I am not ready for more than that. Not yet. I know, he said quickly. I am not asking for promises. I am asking for a chance. Just a chance. She smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed her face into something radiant. Then you have it. Cheeky returned to Lagos the following week, but he was true to his word. Letters came every few days, written in neat handwriting that made Amina laugh. Such careful penmanship from a man who commanded warehouses and trucks and hundreds of employees. He wrote about his work, about the city, about plans for the Abeokuta facility. But mostly, he wrote about ideas and questions and observations, treating her like an equal mind, not a charity case. Amina wrote back, her letters growing longer and more confident with each exchange. She wrote about the cooperative she was building with Chief Ogunlade's support, about the first 5 girls who came to learn weaving and dyeing, about reclaiming her father's forge and hiring a young blacksmith to teach metalwork. She wrote about healing, about nightmares fading, about learning to laugh again. And slowly, carefully, across pages and miles, something grew between them. Not pity or gratitude, but recognition. 2 people who understood what it meant to lose everything and rebuild from ashes. 2 souls who had learned that strength is not the absence of wounds, but the choice to keep standing despite them. Ngozi left the village 1 week after her mother's arrest. The elders had debated banishment, but ultimately decided exile was punishment enough. She departed at dawn with a single bag, heading to live with a distant aunt in a village 3 days' walk away, her face hollow with shame and lost dreams. She tried to approach Amina the night before she left, creeping to the door of the house that had once been hers to command. "Amina," she whispered through the darkness. "Please, I know you have no reason to forgive me, but I am sorry, truly sorry." Amina came to the door, a lamp in her hand, her face unreadable in the flickering light. "Are you sorry for what you did, or sorry that you were caught?" Ngozi flinched. "Both. I will not lie to you anymore. I was cruel because my mother taught me cruelty. I was jealous because you had something I never did, your father's real love. Mine only loved me when I was useful." Amina studied her for a long moment. "I do not forgive you yet. Maybe I will one day, maybe I will not. But I will tell you this. You have a chance now to become someone different, someone better. Do not waste it." Ngozi nodded, tears streaming down her face, and walked away into exile. Whether she would become better or bitter, only time would tell. Kofi, the childhood friend who had betrayed Amina with his false testimony, also tried to apologize. He found her at the stream one morning, the same stream where they had played as children, where he had once promised to always stand beside her. "Amina, please listen," he began, his voice desperate. "I know what I did was unforgivable, but I was threatened. Folake said she would tell the chief I stole tools from his workshop. I would have been arrested, maybe imprisoned. I was afraid. You were afraid." Amina interrupted quietly, not looking at him, continuing to wash the cloth in her hands. "So, you decided I should suffer instead. You decided your fear was more important than my life. I did love you. I still... No, She finally looked at him, and her eyes were cold as river stones. You loved yourself. Real love does not betray. Real love stands in front of knives if necessary. Fear betrayed me. Cowardice betrayed me. You were just the vessel. She returned to her washing. Leave, Kofi. There is nothing for you here. He stood there for several minutes, perhaps hoping she would relent, would soften. But she did not look at him again. Finally, he walked away, and 2 weeks later, word spread that he had left Abeokuta entirely, heading north to find work in Kano. No one mourned his departure. The village had learned a hard lesson about complicity, about the price of looking away, about the courage required to stand against injustice, even when it is inconvenient or dangerous. Amina's cooperative grew rapidly. By the 3rd month, 20 girls lived and worked there, learning trades in a compound donated by Chief Ogunlud and funded by contributions from throughout the village. They made beautiful cloth, dyed in patterns of indigo and gold. They crafted jewelry from beads and wire. They learned blacksmithing and carpentry and leatherwork. More importantly, they learned they were valuable, that their voices mattered, that no one had the right to diminish them. Amina managed it all with quiet competence, discovering leadership skills she had never known she possessed. The girls called her auntie, though she was barely older than some of them. They loved her fiercely because she understood their fear, their anger, their desperate need to be seen as human. She had walked their path. She knew every stone and thorn. And she showed them that survival was not enough. They could thrive, they could build, they could transform pain into power. 6 months after the marketplace confrontation, Chiki returned to Abeokuta. The processing facility was nearly complete, a large modern building on the land that was now legally, irrevocably Amina's. She had leased it to his company for a fair price, money that funded the cooperative and gave her financial independence. But Chike did not go to inspect the facility first. He went to the cooperative, where he found Amina teaching 3 young girls the art of mixing natural dyes, her hands stained blue, her wrapper tied practically, her face animated with the joy of teaching. She looked up when he entered and smiled, and it was not the cautious smile of their first meetings. It was open, genuine, the smile of someone who had learned to trust again. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would." They walked to the stream that evening, the same stream that held so many memories. Childhood games and teenage longing, betrayal and washing away of shame. The water flowed as it always had, indifferent to human drama, constant and clean. "I have been thinking," Chiki said carefully, "about what I want from life. I thought I wanted success, wealth, respect, and I have achieved those things. But watching you build this cooperative, seeing you transform suffering into sanctuary for others, I realize what I actually want." "What is that?" Amina asked. "Purpose. The kind you have found. I want to build things that matter, not just things that profit. I want to stand between cruelty and victims, not just once, but as a way of life."
"I want." He hesitated, then spoke the rest in a rush. "I want to build a life with someone who understands that wealth means nothing if it is not used to heal and protect and lift up the fallen." Amina was quiet for a long time, watching the water flow over stones smoothed by centuries of current. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Not yet. Not now. I am asking if you have had enough time. Time to heal. Time to trust. Time to imagine a future that includes someone standing beside you, not to rescue you, but to build alongside you." She turned to face him fully. "I think I have had exactly enough time," She took his hand, tracing the scar on his arm, the permanent reminder of the day everything changed. You may court me properly, Cheek Okonkwo, if you still wish to. His smile could have lit the darkest night. I do. I absolutely do. 3 months later, they announced their engagement. The village erupted in celebration unlike anything seen in years. It was not just a wedding they were celebrating. It was redemption, justice, the triumph of dignity over cruelty. The wedding was set for the next harvest festival, exactly 1 year after the day Amina had stood in the marketplace facing destruction. The symmetry was deliberate. Where she had once been stripped of dignity, she would now be crowned with honor. Where she had once stood alone and terrified, she would now stand surrounded by community and love. The months of preparation were joyful. The cooperative girls made her wedding clothes, pouring all their skill and love into cloth of gold and crimson, embroidered with patterns that told stories of survival and strength. The village contributed food, music, labor, each person trying in some way to atone for their previous silence. Chief Ogunladi personally oversaw the preparations, his way of making amends for nearly marrying his son into evil. Mama Yetunde wept happy tears daily, seeing the daughter of her heart finally receiving the joy she deserved. And Chike, busy in Lagos with his business, traveled to Abeokuta every weekend, bringing gifts not of gold or jewels, but of books for the cooperative, supplies for the trades, investments in futures beyond his own. 3 days before the wedding, Amina visited her father's grave as she did every week. The plot was well tended now, flowers always fresh, the marker clean and proud. She knelt on the red earth and spoke to him as she always did, telling him about her week, about the cooperative's progress, about the wedding preparations. Baba, I wish you could meet him. Cheek, I think you would approve. He is like you in some ways. Strong but kind, principled without being rigid. He sees people, really sees them, the way you saw me. The wind rustled through the leaves overhead, and she chose to hear blessing in it. I understand now what you meant about being like metal. Life tried to break me with heat and hammer and cruel hands. But I did not break, Baba. I became stronger, just like you said I would. Tears came, but they were not bitter tears anymore. I learned something else too, that cruelty reveals the cruel, never the victim. Folake's evil was hers, not mine. Her shame was hers, not mine. I carried it for 3 years, but it was never mine to carry. She touched the gravestone gently, and I learned that true wealth is not land or gold or inheritance. It is dignity, self-respect, love that sees you at your absolute lowest and chooses you anyway. Not because you need rescue, but because you are worthy of standing beside. She stood, brushing red earth from her wrapper. Thank you, Baba, for loving me, for teaching me to stand straight, for leaving me something to build on. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, sky clear and blue, sun warm but not scorching, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of flowers and cooking fires. The entire village gathered beneath the Iroko tree, the same tree that had witnessed Amina's humiliation. But today it witnessed her triumph. She wore gold and crimson, her hair braided with beads that clicked musically when she moved, her neck and wrists adorned with jewelry made by her cooperative girls. But it was not the clothes or jewels that made people gasp. It was her face, radiant with joy, glowing with confidence, transformed by love and healing and hard-won peace. She walked through the village to the ceremony, and people lined the path, cheering, throwing flower petals, celebrating not just a wedding, but a resurrection. Chike waited beneath the Iroko tree, wearing traditional attire in deep blue, his eyes fixed on Amina with an expression that made the old women sigh and young girls dream. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "You are the strongest person I have ever known." She smiled. "You gave me back my strength." The ceremony was traditional and beautiful, conducted by elders who had once failed her, but now honored her with tears and blessings. When they asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was absolute. Not the silence of cowardice, but of unanimous joy. When Chaiki kissed his bride, the village erupted in celebration that lasted until dawn. They danced, traditional dances and modern ones, solemn ceremonial movements, and wild, joyful spinning. They ate mountains of jollof rice and goat stew, fried plantains and puff-puff, enough to feed hundreds with leftovers for days. They sang old songs about love and new songs about triumph, harmonies that made the night itself seem to sing along. And in the center of it all, Amina and Chike danced, surrounded by community, by the girls from the cooperative, by Mama Yatunde, weeping happy tears, by Chief Ogunlade and elders who had learned the price of silence. Later, as the celebration wound down and the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, Amina stood with Chike at the edge of the gathering, watching her village, her home, celebrate not just a marriage but a collective redemption. "Do you ever think about her?" Chike asked quietly. "Folake?" Amina considered. "Sometimes. I heard she was sentenced to 25 years. The investigation found evidence linking her to all 3 deaths. Justice, finally. Does it bring you peace?" "Peace does not come from her punishment. It comes from knowing I survived her, that I took the worst she could do and transformed it into something beautiful." She gestured at the cooperative girls dancing together. "She tried to destroy me. Instead, she made me strong enough to protect others. That is the greatest revenge, becoming happy, becoming useful, becoming a shelter for those who need one." Chike pulled her close. "I am in awe of you, and I am grateful for you. You did not save me, Chike, but you stood beside me while I saved myself. That is rarer than rescue. That is partnership." They watched the sunrise together, 2 people forged by fire into something unbreakable, ready to build a future that honored the past while refusing to be trapped by it. And in that moment, as dawn broke over Abeokuta, Amina understood the final lesson her father had tried to teach her all those years ago in the forge. Life would always try to break you with heat and force, but if you stayed true to yourself, to your values, to your dignity, you did not break. You became something stronger. You became steel. You became unbreakable. You became exactly who you were always meant to be.